Hey guys, today I'll take a look at my top 3 strong Space Marine lists for Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Black Templars. And we're only using the native detachments, so no Gladius shenanigans or anything like that. So without further ado, let's dive right in. And first we'll take a look at the Sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels. The detachment, what we get is +2 strength on the charge for our melee weapons and also +1 attack. This is quite obviously a very strong start already, because +2 strength means that we might very well go not only through 1 wounding bracket, but maybe even 2. So something that was wounding on 5s can suddenly become wounding on 3s without any extra buffs, any +1 to wounds, and etc., which can stack on top of that. That's why this +1 strength, +2 strength is so good, because we can bypass the limit of +1 to wounds this way by combining the strength and wounding modifiers. Talking about that, the great stratagem you will be always using is the Red Rampage. Beautiful name. You're gonna use that on one of your fighty bricks, and you get lance and lethal hits with that. So +1 to wound on the charge, and a hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds, so helping us to get those attacks through. It's a shame we don't have any AP modifier here like we do in the Gladius, but lethal hits are also a nice thing to have, especially considering that we will have the volume of attacks, so that will convert nicely into wounds and potential failed saves. Talking about that, let's see what we have here in the detachment. We have Limartes as our warlord, and it's an absolute must-have character because we want to have at least one 10-man unit of Death Company Marines with jump packs, with Thunderhammers, and we want them to be protected by the -1 damage he has. The 6-up shrug is not bad at all, but 6-up shrug without anything else is not gonna get you far. However, with -1 damage, they suddenly become a much more serious threat. Unless you're gonna be shot by damage 3 guns, which at that point then you're probably still gonna be in trouble, though 6+ film pain should help you at least sometimes. And he also gives his squad lethal hits, which you get always, not just on the charge. So his squad will always be very efficient against pretty much any target. He also does fight quite well himself, of course, with 5 attacks at strength 6 AP 2 damage 2 and hitting on 2s, of course, with lethal hits. And to accompany him, we of course have a 10-man unit of Death Company Marines with Thunderhammers. The Death Company Marines are pretty much the best unit we have now as Blood Angels to do the big damage to our targets, because they do have the ability to actually carry that damage across the board. They don't require any additional support like most other melee units in the Space Marine books, because they have the jump packs. I still need to note that the Blood Angels as Gladius are, in my opinion, stronger than the Sons of Sanguinius, though with a nice, well-rounded list that you know how to play, you should be able to overcome the innate weaknesses. Because the Gladius, what it lacks in the raw power that you get with the Sons of Sanguinius, it truly brings back with the mobility, because you can always use the advance and charge, which increases your threat range, and threat range is pretty much the measure of how efficient your melee army is. So with Blood Angels, you'll have to be more calculating and really nail your movement phase, and whenever you move out to charge something, you should make sure that the trade is in your favor. But I digress. So we get the mobility, the minimum mobility we want to have with the jump packs on our Death Company. That's why we have 3 units here, 1 big 10-man that goes with the Sanguinor, and 2 5-mans of Death Company that go just alone. You probably want them to be close-ish to the Limartes, at least when they are going to be charging, just because they need the chaplain to have NUC and be able to fall back. It's not the end of the world if they cannot fall back, but you can get into a bad situation where your opponent is using your units to essentially protect their unit from shooting, which you don't want. Luckily enough, we are not a shooting mainly army, so we can just charge another unit in and deal with those perpetrators. Another thing we have here, which is an absolute must-have, is the Sanguinor. It's a brilliant lone-up character that we have as Blood Angels. He costs 140 points. For what you get, it's an absolute bargain. It's a 7 wounds, 4+ invulnerable save, 2+ save lone-up character who has fights first, and he can once per battle at the end of your opponent's charge phase just appear inside the fight phase with his fight first ability active, active, which means that he will be fighting first as well. So whenever your opponent is charging your unit, they will always have a threat of this really killy character appearing in their midst and striking first, and that is no joke because he has 8 attacks, strength 6 AP, 3 damage 2, and hitting on 2s with devastating wound. Add to that the potential pluses on the charge, which he wouldn't get when he just appears on the board, but he will get that in the subsequent fight phases if he survives. You can also turn on the red rampage on him, even though you again would not get the lance benefit, but you can get the lethal hits even without charging. So the best use scenario for him is waiting for a perfect opportunity when something killy enough so that you trigger the Sanguinor, but killable enough so that you can actually get through that unit in one swoop, charges your, I don't know, Death Company or anything like that, and then he appears, kills that unit, your unit now is free, Sanguinor is free, and that happens in your opponent's turn. So next turn you can just fly 12 inches with this guy in whichever direction you want and engage another unit and another unit. So he's like a sort of Smash Captain of 8th edition, but in a different form. What else do we have here? We have a 10-man Assault Intercessor squad. Some of you might be wondering what this is doing here when we have such beautiful units like the Sanguinary Guard or something like that. Problem with the Sanguinary Guard is that it's just too expensive now and it doesn't do enough for its points to really justify taking it, in my opinion, where the Assault Intercessors are just a nightmare if you manage to charge them into the combat. As Blood Angels, they are crazy good. I mean, crazy. They will get +1 to wound from Red Rampage. They will get lethal hits. They will get 5 attacks each. So that's a 150 point unit that pumps out 50 attacks at strength 6 on the charge, AP 1, damage 1, with full rerolls to wound when you're attacking on an objective unit on an objective. And that will be buffed by this Sanguinary Priest, which you can attach to the Assault Intercessors to give them 5 up feel no pain, so they suddenly become quite survivable, and also you get extra AP, so you solve their AP problem as well. So they will be AP 2, which is enough for most applications you can imagine. The only problem of this unit would be the lack of mobility, because they cannot advance and charge, and they just move 6 inches, so we needed some help for them. For that, I always, of course, chose the Land Reader Redeemer, because why would you not bring this thing? It was in the list anyways, it's just the question was what's going to be inside it, and the Assault Intercessors are in this case. You might think that carrying 230 points worth of stuff in a 260 point transport is a bit of an overkill. I would personally disagree, because the Land Reader provides so much toughness, so much mobility to that unit, and so much shooting Overwatch potential just himself, and being this brick that attracts firepower, that he is worth those 260 points even without the consideration of how much the unit he carries costs. Next, of course, now that we have 3 units of Death Company to do our fighting, we have a 10-man Assault Intercessor squad to do the fighting, we have Sanguinor to do that, we have Lamardis to support the Death Company. We needed something to do the not fighty thing, which is shooting, and that something should be very mobile, because that's what Blood Angels are about. Plus, we need some opportunities to potentially screen out or move block units, and that's what Inceptors are great at, and just getting the firepower to wherever you want because of 3-inch dip strike. And it's a very good type of firepower which does not rely really on any external buffs. They are welcome. It's nice to have them, like when you're playing Vanguard or Gladius, but you don't need them so much. And I didn't want to just infest this list with tanks, because they don't feel at home in a Blood Angels list, in my opinion, and I wanted to keep this thematic and powerful. Hence, 1 6-man unit of Plasma Inceptors, so that we can target maybe a very nasty, annoying, big monster thingy and destroy it, or when we have 2 3-man Inceptor squads with Assault Bolters. These are more mobile threats, and potentially maybe like blowing up a unit of infantry, hiding in the back, or again, move blocking, something of that sort. And I wanted to have a bit more units, so that's why I split them. We have 2 units of scout squads. One will just live on an objective, another one is a backup tactical squad that is going to be doing things like secondaries, jumping up and down, along with the Calidus, which we also have in this list, and that rounds it up to 2,000 points on the nose. I must say I'm proud of myself. Another thing you need to know about using this list is, of course, the Relentless Assault stratagem, which I'm so glad they've added here, because a melee army that cannot fall back and charge is always going to feel very constrained. So it's great that we have that for just 1 CP, and it's also a strategic ploy stratagem, so no one can take it away from us. It's a shame it's only fall back and charge, not fall back and shoot, but we can have everything, right? So we also have the 2 CP only in death does duty and stratagem, which is just a fight on death one, and this one doesn't have any fight on 3+, fight on 4+, like we have in the Black Templars. This is just a pure fight on death, which costs 2 CP, which is not nice, but it is a full fight on death, and that's what we want when we are running something like Death Company or 10-man Assault Intercessor squads, where this will be a good thing to spend 2 CP on. Aggressive Onslaught at 1 CP can also be situationally good. It allows you to consolidate 6 inches, but only if you end that move within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units. Shame that they've restricted it only to engagement range and not an objective, which usually you can do with consolidations, because that would be a much stronger stratagem when you can actually move 6 inches to an objective as well. But sometimes it will be nice to have when you want to engage something that perhaps would want to run away next turn and you don't want it to. As always, if you're looking for help building your roster or your collection, check out the links to my Patreon in the description, because I provide personal assistance for that there. Next are the Righteous Crusaders, the Black Templars. Talked a lot about the Black Templars on this channel, and this list is a classic one. We have all the nice things that Black Templars are good at, where we use them to the best of our ability here, and we have the synergies that we want. First of all, we of course run the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow, hence why we have the Tenhauser's Bones relic on the Castone, which it halves damage of the incoming attacks against the Castone, but most importantly it gives the unit that he leads a 5+ feel no pain whilst the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow is active. And he joins, you guessed it, High Marshal Helbrecht, of course, and a 10-man Primaris Sword Brethren unit, which is going to be transported into battle on, you guessed it again, Land Raider Redeemer. A very painful and very nice combo of a huge unit of very killing guys transported into battle on an almost unkillable transport. They are also quite survivable with that 5+ feel no pain and 3 wounds each, especially if you have a CP on Armor of Contempt. That's going to take care of some of the higher AP shooting that they might face, as they don't have the invulnerable save anymore, unfortunately. What else do we have here? We have Chaplain Grimaldus, of course. He is the ultimate buff center for the infantry units, and in my opinion the best unit to run with him is the 20-man Primaris Crusader squad, because he needs to be on the board to activate his vows, his abilities, I should say. By the way, the vows, for those of you who are not maybe Black Templars players, the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow gives 6+ feel no pain to the entire army and also leadership of 5+. So everything that you see here is going to be enhanced by the 6+ feel no pain, and whatever else can have a 5+ feel no pain from the additional ability. So Grimaldus activates his abilities in the command phase, so he needs to be on the board, hence why I don't like to run him with the Sword Brethren, because they do need the protection of a Land Raider, in my opinion. Otherwise they're too juicy of a target and they will be just taken down by plasma, fire of Redemptors or Inceptors or anything like that. Whereas the Crusaders are such a blob type target that it's not even that interesting to shoot at them for some armies, and a lot of damage is going to be wasted just getting through model by model, especially considering they will have the 5+ feel no pain from Grimaldus. Later on they can also turn on Advance and Charge, which solves the problem of their mobility. It's a shame that they cannot get the Scout move to work unless they go without Grimaldus, but they will still be mobile. And lastly, you can get extra AP on their chain swords and their power fists if they survive the first combat. Plus, he will give them full rerolls to hit, so you don't even need to waste Oath of Moment on this huge unit. You need that Oath of Moment elsewhere, wink wink, the unit that is being charged by the Sword Brethren. Without the Grimaldus, they still can get the extra AP from Crusader's Wrath, 1 CP stratagem, and if something charges you, don't forget about Vicious Riposte, where considering that you have your Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow active, you will be fighting back on death on 3 pluses, so very, very likely. You would like your unit to be fighting first, of course, but if something happens with your position, you'd have this layer of safety at least. Plus, if something wants to shoot at your big 10 or 20-man Primaris Crusader squad, you can always use 1 CP for a devout push and move d6 inches closer to that unit, essentially adding d6 inches to your future charge. And you also can be very cunning and tell your opponent about the stratagem before the game, so that every time they want to shoot the big 20-man Crusader squad, you're like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" So that they are perplexed eternally and just decide to give up and concede even before the game ends. Lastly, the Fervent Acclamation stratagem, which allows your character to return on a vow for a unit in addition to the vow that is already active in your command phase. So that's why we probably will be using that on the Crusaders again, because the Sword Brethren will probably be in the transport at that time. We also have in the list 3 Black Templars Gladiator Lancers to solve our big monster, big tank problem once and for all. We do have tank and monster killing capability in the Sword Brethren and Crusader squads, of course, but having that layer of long-range shooting is still necessary so that you can help those units to cross the distance safely. We do have 1 5-man scout squad here, of course, to sit on the home objective, a Vindicator as well to help us with the shooting again, being that sort of a mobile siege tank fortress that runs around and shoots at things that the Lancers or your other units did not finish. And Calidus Assassin, of course, to jump back up and down to do secondaries for you, because you do have mobility in this list, but you don't have a lot of separate units to do things like actions. And lastly, the Inner Circle Task Force. I'm gonna do another video about the Ravenwing probably, but the Inner Circle Task Force I think is the most interesting detachment out of the ones that we have received in the Dark Angels book. It's also quite a perplexing one, because it doesn't have the obvious strength that is easy to get and use like some of other detachments. You do see the strength inside, but you need to unpack it to really utilize it, I think. At least that's how I feel. So what you get from the detachment is quite interesting. At the start of your command phase, you can select 1 objective marker, and until your next command phase, that objective marker is your vowed objective. What it does is each time an infantry unit, Deathwing infantry unit, attacks at the target that is within range of that objective, you can add 1 to the wound roll. And add 1 to the wound roll is a very powerful modifier. First thing we think, of course, is, okay, Deathwing Terminators attacking something on an objective, +1 to wound, cool. That's really nice, I agree, that's a nice combination, and also can be buffed up further by the 1 CP Martial Mastery, which is reroll 1s to wound always for your Deathwing infantry units in the fight phase, or if you are within range of the vowed objective, at that time you can also reroll the wound roll fully, and that is quite strong, allowing us to bypass a lot of problems with getting the wounds through a high toughness, because +1 to wound and full rerolls to wound is enough to get those wounds through pretty much any tough target. But what I wanted to try and do is to utilize that further, and what I wanted to find is a way to get that with the +1 to wound for shooting units as well, for something that is not innately Deathwing, because as the Codex says, the Deathwing keyword is only applied to Terminators, Blade Guard, Stern Guard, and Vanguard veterans, and also our Dreadnoughts, Land Raiders, etc. It does not apply to things like Inceptors, to Assault Intercessors we have in this list, because they're not in this list. However, there's a thing we can do here, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it is fully legal, is using the named characters that we have in the book that have the Deathwing keyword and can be adjacent or added, attached to the infantry units that we want to give the Deathwing keyword to. And judging by the FAQs and the rulebook, the attached unit will also have the keyword of the leader, and that means that that will be a Deathwing infantry unit, say a 10-man Assault Intercessor squad. Just by themselves, they are not Deathwing infantry, so they would not get the +1 to wound on the vowed objective, which would be very, very nice to have, considering they already have reroll wounds, and all they need is this. But if we add Asmodai, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, we will also get reroll hits, from the Asmodai, and also +1 to wound and full rerolls to wound from their own rule, because he's Deathwing, so they will be too. What about Azrael, you might think? Where is he going? So he's a nice, very nice character. He's a chapter master. He gives us SCP at the start of each command phase, hence why you probably want him on the board as much as possible. I'll discuss where he's gonna go in a moment. He also gives the squad he leads sustain hits 1. That's a great modifier, helps pretty much anyone you can imagine, just getting more hits through, and few units have that inbuilt, so there will be no overlap. And what I wanted to do is find something Plasma-ish that we can have in this list, because Plasma and Dark Angels are very similar things. So I've attached him to the 10-man Hellblaster squad, you can see in the lower left. And now that's Hellblaster squad with the Deathwing keyword. So Deathwing Hellblasters, meaning that we can get the +1 to wound from the Vowed objective. And Hellblasters with +1 to wound is very, very strong, because they lack only one thing. They have AP, they have good damage, they have a lot of shots, they hit well. They are also protected somewhat from their own killing themselves because of overcharge, because they can shoot on death, but they lack the strength to wound things like tanks and, I don't know, elite infantry even. And here with +1 to wound, this will be a solved problem. I wanted to solve their mobility issue, that's why I gave them a repulsor, because they will be protected, they'll get the range they need, and also can be sucked back into the repulsor if something charges them. Problem is that then we will have a disconnect with Azrael's ability on the command points, so we'll probably sacrifice the first turn to get a command point, but then next turns he will be transported and then disembarks, and hopefully you'll get a command point then. Problem is that the whole other named characters that I could have added here, they only add bonuses for melee, so Azrael is pretty much the only guy who does something for the shooting, so there will always be some sort of give and take here. What else do we have here? A chaplain in Terminator armor who is going to be leading a 10-man Deathwing Terminator squad, and he has the Deathwing Assault enhancement. That enhancement gives him ability to be set up using dip strike in first turn as well as second and third, regardless of any mission rules. That's very, very helpful, because what we also have in the detachment is the Relic Teleportarium strat, which is a 3-inch dip strike for our Deathwing, and that is very nice because it allows us to, even though we cannot charge obviously, it allows us to position this huge unit of Terminators somewhere where our opponent does not really want them to be. Again, as far as I understand, you can also combine that with Rapid Ingress if you're going second. So your opponent goes first, they move somewhere, then in their movement phase, at the end of their movement phase, you use Rapid Ingress on these guys, and you are able to do that because they can be set up in first turn, so you can use Rapid Ingress in the first turn as well. You set them up somewhere behind the building, and then in your turn you move out 5 inches and charge. So it's sort of a first turn charge guarantee if you're going second, or if you're going first, you can just dip strike them normally within 9 inches, or what I would probably do is dip strike them for 1 CP within 3 inches of your opponent, somewhere where they're going to be very, very close to everything, and then just wait next turn to actually do damage. Plus you will obviously be able to shoot, so you can dip strike them somewhere where you're gonna be on, for example, your opponent's home objective, shoot the unit that was on that objective off of it, and then move out and clear whatever is in front of them next turn. That unit is also going to have nice protection from shooting, because for 1 CP we have Unmatched Fortitude, and that is -1 to wound when the strength is higher than the unit's toughness. Not as strong as -1 damage that we get with the first company, but everything else is much better than the first company detachment, so don't worry. We also have 2 6-man Blade Guard veteran squads, because they do get the Deathwing keyword innately, so they don't need any characters to lead them to get it, and they pretty much don't need any other help as well, because they will get +1 to wound, which is what they really need. And if you really need it, again, you can use Martial Mastery on one of these units, and they are going to be occupying the Land Raider Redeemer again, so that he transports them into battle, because they don't get the mobility innately. The assault intercessors unfortunately don't get the transport option, so they will have to foot slog on their own. You could rapid ingress them, you can reserve and rapid ingress them, I mean, but probably just advancing them up the board and use them as your sort of beta strike unit with Asmodite, because they're gonna strike really hard when they do, but not in the first turn, obviously, and probably not even the second. So that is 2,000 points on the nose of Inner Circle Task Force. The only stratagem, that I want you to know about as well is the Wrath of the Lion, which is in the charge phase, your Deathwing infantry unit that just ended a charge move can do some mortal wounds to units that are within engagement range of them. You add 1 to that if you are within range of valid objective, of course. For each 4+, the enemy is going to suffer 1 mortal wound to a maximum of 3 mortal wounds. The limitation here is not nice. I wish it was at least 6, because 3 mortal wounds is going to be very easy to do with like a 10-man unit of Terminators, and you're gonna max it out every time you do it. It's not bad, 3 mortal wounds is nothing to scoff at, but still would be better if we could do at least 4, or better even 6. And of course we have Fight on Death, as any melee-oriented army should have. It's a 4+ Fight on Death, but you add 1 if you are within range of valid objective. We could also change this list to incorporate Inceptors, because they thematically fit very well and obviously are great units as well, just as the Gladiator Lancer would be a nice option here, or Redemptors, of course, in my opinion as well. But I wanted to keep it light on the tanks, because they don't get pretty much any synergy with the detachment, so we only have the Land Raider, Redeemer, and Repulsor here. That is why. Let me know what you think about my list. If you would have done something differently, please let me know in the comment section below. I always like to hear your advice, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.